And let's welcome to SoundStory, Michael Miller. Michael, good to be with you. This is your life. How are you?
Thanks so much. Great to be here, Frank.
We were born almost on the same day, but a few years apart. You're a May 8th. I'm a May 10th, so we have a lot in common, including your high school, Westminster Christian Academy. Now, I didn't go there. I went to DeSmet. My test scores were too high, so I had to go to DeSmet. But I sent all my kids there and absolutely loved it. You were one of the early ones at Westminster.
That's right. Loved being a Wildcat. Great teachers, great program. It formed me for life, for sure.
Yeah. Mr. Marsh, was he running it?
He was. You better believe it.
What an unbelievable man he is.
Oh, loved Mr. Marsh. Yeah. And I mean, some of the teachers that I had, are still teaching there or just recently retired. I mean, they've had
Dr. Holly was probably there.
Dr. Holly, you better believe it.
Yeah.
Yep, I had him in 12th grade for English literature.
One of the most impressive things about that school is with all three of my kids, if you could ask them, and they're all adults, like of their 10 best friends, probably 7 of them are from Westminster. You probably still have some lifelong friends from Westminster.
You better believe it. Even though I've lived in Honduras for 25 years, I still stay connected. It's such an amazing, supportive, formative community. Sure.
And they really do try to apply Scripture to everyday life. I know we have plenty of wonderful Catholic schools in the area, but it's one of the few schools where you get hardcore Scripture at you quite a bit.
Absolutely. In modern times, you need to understand how to be able to live, as a good man and as a Christian man. And I feel like Westminster did an amazing job of making those applications for daily living.
So at what point in your life, at what age do you think you started to surrender it to the Lord and really became a Christian?
I was baptized at age 8, and it was a special time because I grew up in a family where we were generations of Christians, and my mom's got my great-grandfather's certificate of being a Baptist deacon hanging on the wall of her condo, and I came to understand who Jesus was and what he did for me at a very young age, and I was baptized at Bethany Baptist Church when I was 8 years old.
And you've never really wavered? You've always been a believer?
Always been a believer. Of course, anybody has times that are strong. Anyone has times that are difficult, times of doubt. But the Lord has been faithful throughout it all, for sure.
Let's talk faith. Hebrews 11:1. Faith is a confident assurance of what we hope is going to happen and certain of things we do not see. Now, do you feel that?
Absolutely. I work with street kids in Honduras, and these are kids who have gone through so much trauma. Some of them are addicts from the age of 8. So you have to have a long-term view when you start that work because it could take 10 years for a kid to truly leave all that behind. And so when we see the great heroes of faith, often they were men and women who were weak and failed the Lord, and he used them anyway, and he used them despite that weakness. And I see that in my life every single day. I'm not a man who is perfect by any means, but I've seen the Lord's perfect love throughout my life.
We're going to talk about the Micah Project in just a little bit, but let's get back to your faith a little bit.
Yeah.
Do you expect immediate answers? And how do you handle that delay and maybe never getting what you're asking for from the Lord?
I do not expect immediate answers. I understand that the way the Lord works is often well beyond what we understand. We're called to get up every single day and walk faithfully. Even if we only see darkness ahead, we're called to walk through that and trust that the Lord's plans are better than ours, and to trust that the Lord's faithfulness will never, ever fail, no matter what it is we're going through.
And when you do have to wait a long time, does your faith at all waver?
Our faith will waver every single day. I think fear and doubt is just a part of our walk. And one of the reasons we're called to be in community is when we are going through a time where we don't know what's happening, we have others to lift us up and to encourage us to keep walking forward, even if we don't feel it, even if we don't understand it. And sure, that happens. Of course, that happens. And I think it's through that time that God makes us strong, you know.
Now, in the Bible, of course, with the widow, the persistent prayer going after the judge, she eventually got what she wanted. But a lot of people don't. And do you try to end every prayer with your will or according to your will?
I do. It is God's will, but of course, that takes persistence. And I think God wants us to be persistent. He wants us to continue to pursue what we believe is his will, even if we don't know that exactly. And so if that requires breaking through doors and climbing walls, then that's what we're going to do for sure.
If I could get really personal, what's on top of your prayer list right now for yourself?
We are in a time, because I live in Honduras and it's a difficult country, we're in a time of change down there. And I just pray at age 52 now that God would give me the strength and the wisdom to continue to do his will, to continue to keep on keeping on in Honduras.
So you went to Wheaton College, obviously a strong Christian school. What was that experience like?
Wheaton was amazing because coming out of Westminster, in Wheaton, I met people from all different faith backgrounds in the Christian church, obviously, and it called me to create and form a deeply held faith that is also, because Wheaton's a very missional school, it sends people out all over the world, and so it challenged me to think. It challenged me to not just take on what I've learned from 8 years old, but to think what that means and to apply that as a Christian adult.
So you get out of Wheaton and right away you become an elementary school teacher in Texas. Any Christian base to that at all, or just a regular teacher?
I was just a regular public school teacher. I had a deep love for Latin America. I was a bilingual school teacher, and Houston is a great, vibrant city to be in. And so I got a job at one of their very first charter schools ever and was able to practice my bilingual education.
Well, that sounds like a pretty good job. Public school usually has great retirement packages. Did you think at one time between like 94 and 98 that, hey, this is what I'm going to do and cash in on retirement eventually? Or
I did. And when you're a male elementary school teacher, there's a push to go into administration. So I could easily have seen myself becoming a principal and practicing my whole career in elementary education in Houston, for sure.
So there comes a time when you make this huge change that you got to make a big decision to make. You could have stayed there, probably made good money, who knows, could have been a superintendent one day, and you decide, no, I want to start the Micah Project. What got you to do this? And first of all, you probably should explain what the Micah Project is all about.
Absolutely. The Micah Project is a Christian nonprofit organization in Tegucigalpa, Honduras, which is the capital, that works specifically with street kids. And so we go onto the streets underneath the bridges of the capital city, and we build relationships with these kids. Street kid in Honduras means something a little different than it is here. I mean, you might find an 8-year-old or a 9-year-old or a 10-year-old on the streets, and we invite them to come into our group homes. And basically, we begin a journey with them. Often, we're basically their family until they grow up, turn 18 and beyond, and help them become the men that God wants them to be. And so, during my time at Wheaton, I spent 6 months in Honduras on an international studies program, and I fell in love with that work. God broke my heart for the population of street kids, which I was doing even through Wheaton College. And when I was in Houston for those 4 years, God continued to pursue my heart for that ministry. And so I felt called, in 1998, I felt called back to Honduras full time.
But what a gamble when you think about it, because you got no money and you want to start this thing. I mean, there must have been some real financial tough times for you, and were there ever times where you thought, I don't know if this is going to work?
It was completely about having faith that this is what God wanted me to do, because I didn't know anything about nonprofit organizations. And I began to work with these kids. we had a major hurricane come through Honduras in 1998, and I spent the year of 1999 doing hurricane reconstruction. And it was in that year that God, I really felt, leading me to open the group home and began to reach out to people, and God was faithful. We were able to buy a home within 6 months of planning the project.
With what money?
It was faithful people here in St. Louis, mostly.
Green Tree's one of the...
Green Tree Central Presbyterian Church, who loved me and who believed that God was calling me to work with street kids. And literally, they poured out so that we could do this project in Honduras.
And you have plenty of incredible success stories of street kids going on to have successful lives. One of them you told Sunday at Green Tree Community Service about a young man who's killing it in the food industry as a great chef.
Amazing.
Tell me the story.
His name is Mario. I actually, because we worked with his older brother who had been on the streets, we knew Mario from the time he was born. But he was born into one of the most dangerous barrios or neighborhoods in Tegucigalpa that was 100% controlled by the gangs. And so, to get into this neighborhood, the gang members who have large weapons will make you roll down the windows of your car. And if you don't belong there, they'll either turn you around or worse. And so Mario was born into this neighborhood and basically had no chance. You know, when he was just 11 years old, the gang made him go to work for them. The gangs will use the kids because kids are expendable. And so Mario's job at the age of 11 was to go around to the different small businesses in his barrio, home front businesses, and charge the gangs war tax, which is basically blood money. So the gangs say, you will pay us a certain amount to operate in our territory, or else we will burn your business, burn your vehicle, kill you, whatever. So Mario had to go and do this because the gangs made him do it. And so when he was 13 years old, he was arrested and would have gone to Honduras's juvenile prison, which is basically a finishing school for criminals. So because we knew his family through his older brother, we went and we talked to the judge, and the judge allowed Mario to join the Micah Project's group home. That never happened before. And so Mario came, you know, he never had any thought about his future before, and he just never looked back. And so we had just started a color. It was 2020, so everything had shut down, and one of our grads had used the kitchen of our group home to start a culinary program for other grads who had lost their opportunities during COVID. And so Mario, at the age of 13, joined that program and found so much joy in it. I mean, he was, the kitchen was there was always music going, and the guys were laughing and joking and cooking. And so you can imagine the environment, and it just transformed Mario. And so he pushed through. Last year, he graduated from high school, but he was also pursuing the culinary arts. And almost without us realizing it, he applied and was accepted to Le Cordon Bleu in Lima, Peru, which is one of the most distinguished culinary programs around the world. And he moved there in March and is just flourishing. He will become a world-class chef. And it's just a sign of God's love. And we don't look at these guys for where they are right now, but we look at them through God's eyes.
What does Mario cook really well, by the way?
Mario can cook anything. It's funny because he loves sushi.
Okay.
And you don't consider maybe Tegucigalpa, which is in the mountains of Honduras, a hotbed for sushi. But man, he can cook it like anybody's business for sure.
You know, you're right about Lima. They have like maybe 3 of the 10 best restaurants in the world if you look at those rankings.
Absolutely. And Mario's the chefs and his professors at Le Cordon Bleu are some of the best in Latin America. And it's a very strict program. And Mario can do anything. You know, he has to go if he has a wrinkle in his chef's uniform, they won't let him into the program. It's that disciplined. And you learn to bow your head and say, yes, chef, no, chef, yes, chef. And Mario's just flourishing in that environment.
So how big, is the Micah Project in Honduras? Like, how big is the home? What's your operating budget? How many kids do you actually have there now?
The Micah Project right now is just working with about 40 youth. We only have 18 in our group home. That's because many of these kids obviously come to Micah with severe trauma and PTSD. You know, we had a kid named Oliver who came into our program and he had never slept in a bed before. He was 12 years old. And so his first 2 months at Micah, we of course had a bed for him, but he'd wake up every morning and be on the floor. That's just all he knew. And so Micah believes in investing deeply into each individual life. So we only keep our group home to 18 young men, ages 12 through early 20s, and we invest deeply in their lives. When they finish in the Micah house, they can transition to another home we have called the Timothy house to finish whatever post-high school degree they're pursuing, whether it's college or a technical program, culinary, whatever it might be. And then we have a program called Micah Works, which is for older youth coming off the streets, and it's a job training program. They can learn in a salon program, young women. They can learn in the culinary program, a technical education program for carpentry. Our job is to help them to thrive, and so we invest deeply in their lives. We have a pastor on our staff that disciples them as well. We have a psychologist to help break through any of that trauma they're coming in with. We understand that it's a long-term commitment that we're making to each kid.
So with Timothy, that house,
Yeah.
and Micah, how many kids would that be total?
So total between Micah House and Timothy House is about 30. And then we have right now about 15 young people who are not living with us. We're supporting them. They're a little older to live in apartments while they do our Micah Works training programs.
And how many full-time on staff? And you don't have to tell me, but what about the operating budget?
Yes. So we currently have close to 40 staff members running all of our programs. Our budget's a little over $1 million a year. We have, because of the population we work with, we have somebody awake and on duty 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, which creates the need for a large staff.
Wow. So part of your job is as a fundraiser. You're in charge of the whole thing, but you make trips back, like you speak at Green Tree, you'll probably speak at Central. Is that what you're trying to do to generate?
Absolutely. Yeah, we're asking for people to make a commitment to the Micah Project. We believe the people see God at work when they commit to Micah. Many people will choose a boy to pray for long term, and they see how God transformed lives. And so I really feel like as people connect with Micah, it becomes a blessing for them as well, because they get to see their commitment, whether it's a monthly commitment or whatever it might be, blooming and blossoming in a life over time. It's a beautiful thing to see.
Wow, that's absolutely amazing. So how many kids do you think you've worked with total? If you've been around since 2000, right?
That is right. We opened Micah in January of 2000. Our first generation guys are starting to turn 40, which is crazy to see. We've worked with over 100 kids, and we're in a really beautiful time of life right now because obviously they've grown up. And these are kids that most of them never knew their father. Some don't have a mom either. Maybe they were raised by a grandma for a while. And to see them become dedicated husbands, loving fathers. Right now, I'm in a time where I get to meet my quote-unquote grandkids. So our guys will bring their kids back to Micah to play on our playground, and to see them having broken through generational poverty and becoming loving fathers and husbands is a miracle to me.
And you've never had a chance to be a husband because you've been so wrapped up in this.
I am not married. I don't have kids. I have 3 big dogs that I live with, and
in Honduras.
And yeah, over 100 spiritual children, you could say, and grandchildren.
So you're 52 now. How much longer do you think you can do this?
I'm thinking 90, 95 years old. I'll probably retire. Yeah.
Now, what about like mom and dad? You grew up in this Christian home. How about relatives here?
I do. I am staying with my mom and dad here in St. Louis. They've been lifelong members of Central Presbyterian Church. My sister as well works for Washington University. She's an accomplished author as well. And so we have a small family, but I love coming. I try to get to St. Louis a couple of times a year to connect with them and try to take in a game while I'm here as well.
So you could picture yourself doing nothing else but this. This is your passion and your love.
This is my life. Absolutely. Of course, when you're a missionary, you stay open to what God wants for you. And so he could call me elsewhere, but I've been in Honduras for 25 years and I don't see him doing that. So, and every day is different. Believe me, even in 25 years when you work with street kids, there's no day that's the same, for sure.
And when you say street kids, you literally mean that at night, at 10 o'clock at night, they are sleeping on the street.
In Latin America, you'll see kids who you'll walk in the different plazas of the city, and you'll see kids who have like just a plastic Coke bottle with an inch or two of yellow industrial glue in it, and you'll see them huffing that glue through their mouth, and that's the drug of choice for street kids.
What does that do to them?
It turns them into zombies, and so they say that it'll kill hunger pangs, and it will make them sleep better when it's cold. Tegucigalpa's in the mountains, so we have cooler nights, and they get addicted to that. And so you'll see kids as young as 11, 12 years old walking around with this glue bottle tucked into their shirt and just glassy-eyed.
Okay, so obviously, if people wanted to be a part of this, they go to the Micah Project online. You can do that. Now, a lot of times when we talk about people take mission trips, do you allow for people to come from the United States to just be a part of it, to help out for a week or something like that? Or
we do. We not only allow it, but we encourage it.
And what would they do? Say somebody from Kirkwood wants to help out for a week. What would they do if they got there?
Absolutely. You know, we encourage people to do it. People hear about Honduras on the news, and you get an impression that it's very dangerous. And of course, there are dangerous parts to it, but in the 25 years we've hosted people, nothing's ever happened. Micah Project currently has a facility that's about 7 acres with a soccer field, of course, and a basketball court that the boys use for soccer. And people come and they just connect with every aspect of our program. So they hang out with our boys, might kick a ball around or do a puzzle with them. We take them down to downtown area to do street ministry with us. So they get to meet the kids right there on the streets. We take them into our different training programs, whether it is the salon program or the culinary program. We may have people cook with our boys in part of the culinary program. Some people will do projects. We do have construction projects. We've built an elementary school for the neighboring community. We built a clinic. We built some homes. So we have something for everybody, whether they're 90 years old and we had 90-year-olds visit Micah, or youth. We'll put you to work for sure.
You mentioned that there haven't been any incidents, but there had to have been a time, since you've been there for a quarter of a century, where you've been in dangerous situations.
We've had everything from hurricanes to military coups to our airport being shut down. When you live in a country like Honduras, you'll go through pretty much everything. But it's interesting.
But like you yourself on the streets, when you're trying to preach and get these kids, you've had to have encountered some dangerous situations, right?
So it's interesting. I was walking up to our Timothy house in downtown Tegucigalpa, and I was robbed at gunpoint. This was many years ago. They took my cell phone, my backpack, my wallet. I gave it all to them, and I walked up to the house, and like an hour later, we got a phone call, and they said, "Are you the American guy from the Micah Project who just got robbed?" And I said, "Yes, that was me." And they said, "Oh, they're so sorry. They didn't realize you were from the Micah Project. We're going to bring your stuff back to you." So I was a little nervous at first. I was afraid they'd come back and clean out the rest of the house, but sure enough, a few minutes later, 2 young women in gang clothes came, and they returned my backpack, and they returned my cell phone. They returned my wallet. My wallet always has a mix of money, and Honduran money looks like monopoly money anyway. They had organized all of my money by denomination, and they said, "We're sorry. We didn't realize you were from the Micah Project."
Huh.
So that shows, I guess, the reputation of us working on the streets and God's protection as well.
Obviously, the name Micah, very prominent in the Bible, but tell me why you named this the Micah Project.
Absolutely. Our theme verse is Micah 6:8, which is, He has showed you, O man, what is good. What does the Lord require of you but to act justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God? And we saw that image as what we wanted our young men to become. Men who worked for justice, who understood God's mercy, and who would live lives of transformation with him in Honduras. Ultimately, we want them to be agents of change in a very poor country.
Are you familiar with Joe Potabon?
No.
Okay. A real strong Christian man here who died a few years back from Alzheimer's. A real good friend of Green Tree Church in the beginnings of that church. But he named one of his sons Micah. But he's the most on-fire Christian man I've ever been around. And one of the things I always noticed about him, particularly after he gave his life and surrendered his life to Jesus, was he just didn't have much anxiety at all. He just, he had all these kids and he had a business, a lot of things that would give you anxiety, but he never had it. And I've only been around you here for a half hour, but I get the belief that you don't have much anxiety, even though you're responsible for a lot of things. Are you worried about anything?
I don't live my life with much anxiety. I have seen the Lord work in amazing ways. Micah Project has gone through times of abundance, and we've gone through times of scarcity. We've gone through times where we don't know where we're going to pay our staff in the next week or two because our funds are low. And in 25 years, we have had exactly what we've needed to do what God has called us to do. Of course, as I said, we've gone through difficult times. We've lost kids on the streets who have become victims of gang violence, and we've buried kids, and we've gone through grief, and we've gone through tears. But through all that, we have seen God's extraordinary love. I feel at this point that whether God chooses to allow me and the Micah Project to go another 20 years or 50 years, he's the one who's in control ultimately.
But are there ever times where you look at some of these kids, even the ones that don't go to the actual Micah home, and you think, where is God that he would allow so much suffering and such a poor quality of life for these kids who didn't do anything wrong? Do you ever ask that question?
We see such brokenness that it can keep you up at night. We see kids who have been born onto the streets, whose moms are mentally ill. They may be selling their bodies in order to survive. But we believe that God calls his church, and he has equipped us to be a light to this population. We are to go into the darkness with his light. We're to do that bravely, and we're to do that with the intention of bringing the brokenhearted to him. And so I don't question him for this broken world that we live in. I ask him to empower us to be able to be a light to that world.
Let me give you a Hebrews 10:35. Don't throw away your confidence. It will be richly rewarded. You have to persevere, and when you do, you will get what God has promised. I wonder, have there been times, though, where it's been tough to persevere for you, where you, I wouldn't say doubted God, but you're yelling, where are you now?
Yeah. Like I said, we've lost some kids, and Micah does not ever give up on a kid. We don't have a 3 strikes and you're out policy. We have an open door, so if a kid goes back to the streets and back to drugs, we continue to love them right on the streets as much as we loved them when they were in our home. We believe that God never, ever gives up on us, and so we don't ever give up on a kid. There was a kid named Jefferson. He was one who was born to a mentally ill prostitute, so he never had that, initial intimacy, initial attachment. The kids need to thrive, And so when Jefferson joined our group home as a 12-year-old, he didn't know what it meant to be loved or to love. And so we had to teach him that, but it was very difficult. And Jefferson would, because he also came in with PTSD. I remember one time someone just kicked a soccer ball that lightly brushed his leg, and it triggered a PTSD response, and he just started to rage. And we know how to handle PTSD, so we just gently got close to him, and we were talking in a loving voice, and we were just helping him to come down out of that. And eventually he sat down next to me and just began to cry. And he'd ask me, Michael, did I do good today? And normally he didn't. Normally he was having a rough day, because what he did, I would always say, yeah, Jeff, you're doing good. Keep on keeping on. We love you, man. And he left the home, and he came back in a couple of times, but just the trauma and the grief drove him back to the streets. And then we heard about a month later that he had been kidnapped and killed by the gangs.
Oh, boy.
And, you think a 14-year-old at that time who lost his life, and you wonder why. You ask those questions. Again, we fight hard for these kids. We want them to do well. And we do realize that I have no power to change someone's heart. All I can do is be open to them and help them to pursue that. But in the end, they have to do that. And I believe that God is faithful even in loss. I believe that Jefferson is waiting for me in heaven, and one day we're going to be reunited, and he's in a place where he doesn't have that profound grief and loss from his childhood. It does hurt. We've lost 9 kids who we've loved deeply, but their loss fires us up to continue to do this work and to do it always in a better way, to pursue it.
Your parents live where?
They are here in Shrewsbury,
Shrewsbury.
Missouri.
Okay. Yeah. So, and you get back here how often?
2 or 3 times a year, if I can, for short visits.
How long would that be, roughly?
Usually it's just a week. This time it's 2 weeks, just because of different things I'm doing.
Are there ever times like you get here and you're staying in a nice home in Shrewsbury, the meals are prepared, you're going to a couple of Cardinal games, and you think, I could get a job back here and not deal with all that back there? Have you ever thought about, I'm not going to get on the plane?
I think in the early years when it was harder and when everything, we didn't know if it was going to work the first few years, We were investing in these lives, but we knew it was going to take 10 years and now, St. Louis is my home, but Tegucigalpa, Honduras is also my home. And I love both places. I love coming here to visit and be with family, and my parents have given up a lot for me to be there, and they love the Micah Project and they love the boys, but it's a long way away, and they don't speak the same language as their grandkids, so they have sacrificed for that, but they love it and they support me in that, and I love them for it.
And in Wheaton, you learned Spanish?
I did, yeah. I did.
Maybe that was, and you had no idea when you're learning Spanish that one day you're going to utilize it.
I did.
Maybe it was all God's plan. You were destined to do this.
It was destined to do it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What do you miss most about not being here, by the way?
Sometimes, I love being here in the community of believers. I get to visit, my home church, Central Presbyterian, every once in a while. I miss Easter with them, and I miss being a part of that community. But again, God has been faithful. He's given me a beautiful community in Honduras. And when people come to visit, I love the connection point when my longtime friends and church members get to spend a few days with me in Honduras. It's like both of my worlds get joined into one.
What would you do for fun? Say you have a couple of nights off where you don't have a whole lot of responsibilities with Micah's project and you're in Honduras. What would you do for fun?
It's funny because in Tegucigalpa is a city of about 1.5 million people, so we've got some restaurants and movies and parks and things like that, just like any city. Lately, because I live in a country that is obsessed with soccer, football, lately we've all become St. Louis City SC fans, big time.
Oh, you watch the games?
Oh, you better believe
City
it.
SC games while you're in Honduras.
You better believe it. And all of my boys have become big-time City SC fans, too. So normally Honduran kids, they follow the Honduran League. They follow the European League. Everybody's either Barcelona or Real Madrid fans. But I have a nice big group of fans who are supporting City SC with me right now. So if there's a game on a Saturday night, we all gather and we all watch it. And
is that right? So they could be fans of Berkey or Klaus?
Oh, you bet. They're all Berkey fans. Absolutely Berkey fans. And Klaus, boy, when he hit that goal the other day after a long dry spell,
yes,
we erupted into major. I think you may have heard it all the way from Honduras. So
wow, that's cool.
It's pretty amazing.
Have you have a City SC shirt or a hat yet? Or?
As a matter of fact, we have a shirt that the whole team signed that we're getting to auction off this Saturday at our pickleball tournament. So
oh yeah, I'm actually going to that.
I heard. Are you a good player?
I'm okay. My wife plays like 4 days a week. She's addicted.
I love it.
Yeah.
We did on our little basketball soccer court. We put in the pickleball frame, and the boys have been playing down there. And they'll play everything. I mean, they're teenage boys, so they've gotten obsessed by it these last few weeks.
Who would be the most famous athlete to ever come from Honduras? It'd have to be a soccer player, I guess. Or...
It would be a soccer player. Some of the Honduran players play in Europe, and they love that. Right now, there's an amazing Honduran baseball player, which is Mauricio Dubon. He's playing with the Astros, sorry to say.
Huh.
But it was Honduras does not have much of a baseball influence, but he's been doing really well with the Astros. So if he hits a home run, it'll make the front page on the Honduran newspaper. It's
wow.
pretty
And
amazing.
do they have one soccer stadium that seats a lot?
They have a couple soccer stadiums. There's a Honduran club league. And so there's two big cities, San Pedro Sula and Tegucigalpa. Both of them have big stadiums. And, if the Honduran national team plays, it's basically
like
a holiday. So
50 or 60,000 or even more.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
How about the best meal you can get there? What would be a couple of great things you could eat in Honduras?
Honduras has a typical dish called a pupusa, which is basically a tortilla that's stuffed with beans and cheese, or pork and cheese. It's kind of a delicacy. I love just their traditional plate, which is fried plantains, fried beans, little rice, a little chicken or beef, and I could eat it all day long.
Yeah.
Homemade tortillas. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess you can't come back here and eat Mexican food in St. Louis after you've eaten that.
Man. Well, especially now that we have a culinary school on our property. Oof, man.
So you're turning out chefs.
We are certainly turning out chefs. We've got guys working in Honduras right now in the food industry. It's a great industry because it's a growth industry. Even in Honduras, where there's huge amounts of unemployment, there's a tourism industry there on the Caribbean coast and all that, and our guys can get jobs in that industry.
Yeah,
so.
I always talk to coaches, and they always say, almost every one of them, that their greatest satisfaction is when they're in their office and a guy who played for them. And he'll come back after 10 years and say, Coach, I just want to thank you for what you've done for me, and this is what I'm doing with my life. They all are just enamored with the success stories after they're done. I imagine that's one of your biggest thrills.
It is such a beautiful thing to see our guys thriving. And that's, in the end, that's what we care. We want them to become, men of faith. We want them, again, to break generational bonds of poverty. To be able, we don't make them choose any sort of profession, but they can pursue whatever it is in their heart, and we'll make that happen. And to see a guy who's 35 and who's a civil engineer and has 2 kids and a lovely wife, and to have them come back to our property to spend a day, it's true satisfaction right there. You see the fruits of the labor for sure.
You think that, I know you don't know right off the top of your head, but 60-70% of them that have been in your home end up being Christians?
I think so, absolutely. And they may go through a hard time too because of what they went through. Often they have to go through a season of doubt and a season of hardship, and we're there for that. We're not scared of it. We're not forcing them to be anything, but we walk with them. I think our staff, because we have a loving staff, There's nobody who's, cracking the whip. We obviously have structure and we have routine and we have discipline, but it's in the context of love and understanding and support. So the boys come to understand that that's how our God is as well. And we're trying to model that.
So you even have to recruit, like you have a doctor on staff. You got how many staff members? Is it
Almost 40. Mm-hmm.
40. So you carefully and meticulously choose these. Are all 40 Christians?
They are, and some are graduates from our program.
Oh, that's awesome.
And we love when that happens because they understand what the boys are going through, and so they can meet them where they're at. We may have a kid going through a real hard time and a struggle, and to have staff members that understand that and to be able to encourage them is an amazing thing.
I should know this, but because I've heard the name Micah Project for so long, maybe because of the affiliation with Green Tree, but are you the only one of its kind in the United States or all over the world that there's only one Micah Project home?
There are Christians doing amazing things all over the world. I think Micah Project is unique because we're not a traditional orphanage. The kids are coming to us later in life. They're choosing to be there. They can stay for as long as they're willing to be walking forward and pursuing their goals. We're going to walk forward with them. So, we have a kid right now who's 15 years old and in the second grade, and so obviously by 18, he may not be ready to step out into the world. We're going to continue to walk with him and help him to get the training he needs. And I do think that makes us unique. Of course, there are people doing fantastic things all over the world, and we try to learn from them as well. Micah has a philosophy of always pursuing best practice. And when it's kids who are traumatized and kids who are addicted, that's a moving target. So we're continually figuring out ways to do what we do better.
Mm-hmm. All right, so what do you want one of these 100 Honduran boys that you work with, what would you want them to say at the end of their time at the Micah house about you and the house itself?
I would say that they would come to us and say, Micah met me when I was at my lowest point and helped me to become the man that I was created to be. I don't believe that anybody was born to live and die on the streets. We don't know why God allows that to happen, but we're going to fight for them. And I would say that we don't ever believe that we're better than any of our guys. As a matter of fact, we stand in awe of what they've had to face, and we stand in awe of how boldly they walk towards a future when they've never seen that modeled for them ever. They have no past that would say that if I work hard, I can achieve this. That's not in their vocabulary. That's not in their psyche. So we stand in awe of them. We're not ever lording it over them. We try to learn from them as well. We are as broken as they are, and at the end of the day, maybe we weren't on the streets, but we've all seen loss and we've all mourned together. And I would say that they would say, Micah has walked with me through thick and thin. They are my family, and they have given me wings to soar.
That is a great answer. Michael Miller, we greatly appreciate you coming in. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Frank. Great to be here.
That'll do it for this edition of SoundStory.